and this is the Ingraham angle from Washington tonight. Are Democrats attempting a power grab to hurt Republicans' chances at winning future elections? Forget 2020. How about any election? And could the social justice obsession actually be the demise of the Democrats? Newt Gingrich is here with the big picture. Plus, we expose the hypocrisy of the lamestream media's outrage over Paul Manafort's sentencing. We got Ken Starr, Robert Ray, two former independent counsels. Are going to be awesome. And breaking tonight, Jussie Smollett. Well, the Empire actor has been charged with 16 felonies for his hate crime hoax. That's a big one. And then the fall of two music icons. Is it time to stop listening to any of their music? Michael Jackson, R. Kelly, Raymond Arroyo here to break it all down in Friday Follies. And of course, it's Friday, so we have to reveal this week's worst media moments. But first, the Democrats are on a mission to divide this country. As President Trump is rebuilding this country, these social justice warriors are doing everything they can to take us to the brink. So what's the latest obsession? Reparations.
So you are for some type of...
Yes, I am.
Reparation. Okay.
Yes, I am.
Sure. America has a dark history of slavery, and we need to confront it head on.
You believe in reparations. The idea that black people should get reparations as a result of slavery and discrimination.
You know, I have long thought that this country would be better off if we did find a way to do that.
That's going to unite the country. Here now to respond, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, host of the new fabulous podcast, Newt's World, available now on Apple Podcasts. All right, Speaker, the reparations, how they would determine that, who's responsible, when you came into the country, lineage, how they do that aside. That's going to be the great thing that brings us all together as Americans.
Well, when you watch Elizabeth Warren, who has apparently been lying about being a Native American, start to describe reparations, and you start wondering, first of all, it's not fair to only talk about reparations for African Americans. What about Native Americans? And then you have to start thinking about, what about Latinos who feel bad? What about people from Ireland who were discriminated against when they first came over here?
Italians.
I think all of us owe each of us everything from each of us, and therefore we should all be happy when we all give each other whatever we do. This is insane. This is, you're watching a party, not since George McGovern have we seen the quality of insanity that these people are now stooping to. For example, Kamala Harris, who I believe says that she is actually from the Caribbean. So would she be eligible for reparations? Or having voluntarily come to America, is she not eligible for reparations? You start down this road and it becomes literally insane, and you have to wonder how these people talk themselves into it.
Well, Kamala Harris actually said the other day, we all have to acknowledge that we don't start on an equal footing. I'm like, sweetheart, welcome to the world. Yeah, that's kind of the history of human civilization. It matters what you do with what you have. But that's, and Tom Sowell told me today on the podcast, he said, Laura, well, does that mean that people came in at the turn of the last century, had nothing to do with slavery? So those folks have to then like open up their wallets and pay out? What?
Well, sure. Let's say you're a first-generation Nigerian American doing pretty well. Do we now increase your taxes to pay for somebody else whose family may have come here 400 years ago? Or do you get to be eligible too? I mean, what's the basis for this?
This one issue could end up being the downfall of the Democrats in 2020. Just this issue. You mention this to people across the country, they go crazy. Like, what? It doesn't pass the straight face test. But Newt, I know you've been following the other nightmarish stuff going on in the Democrat Party, these anti-Semitic remarks of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Now today, Speaker Nancy Pelosi is making even more excuses for her. Let's watch.
I don't think our colleague is anti-Semitic. I think she has a different experience in the use of words, doesn't understand that some of them are fraught with meaning that she didn't realize.
Steve King got, that treatment.
No,
right? I mean, I got all these people make excuses for the left, but a conservative makes a mistake and it's over for them.
Well, we have to understand what's going on here. Nancy Pelosi and her two leaders and sidekicks are all almost 80 years old. They're grandparents. Omar and that entire group of younger radicals are like the grandchildren. And they walk in the room and they go, hey, you've already failed. You know, you had 60 years to solve this. You haven't solved this. So what you have, and this is a huge change from 30 or 40 years ago, they have no automatic respect for her or anybody else in the leadership. And I think she's going to continue to lose control. And so now, of course, when somebody like Representative Omar says something that's utterly indefensible, but she's in Nancy Pelosi's caucus, Nancy Pelosi has to go out and risk looking like a fool trying to defend somebody who's indefensible.
Nate, no, we talked to a Muslim reformer last night, a woman, incredible former Wall Street Journal reporter. She was up there filming Linda Sarsour on Capitol Hill, who was being escorted up to Capitol Hill by a member of the Council on American Islamic Relations. And it's like, this has gone way radical chic. This isn't the chic new freshman. This is a radicalization of the Democrat Party, of, forget JFK and Scoop Jackson. It's radical for Joe Biden.
No, what you're seeing happen is what's happened to the British Labour Party.
I was just going to say Jeremy Corbyn.
Where Jeremy Corbyn is such a Stalinist and such an anti-Semite that his party's being torn to shreds. And I think you're about to see that here. They can't continue to have what you've described here just in this few minutes. Policy insanity over reparations and simple decency insanity over anti-Semitism. And they can't get themselves out of it.
Now, I know you served in Congress with Joe Scarborough, and he spends a lot of time on television talking about how Trump is bad. But this is one of the great examples of someone totally off the rails this week in the media. Let's watch.
He's not just doing worse than Barack Obama. He's doing worse than every American president, and he's actually screwing up the border situation that Barack Obama's administration improved markedly.
Well, you know, Scarborough a long time ago decided that his future was on the left. His future was being this is classic of the modern media. He is an anti-Republican Republican, which is the kind the media loves the most. And so what happens with guys like this is they listen to themselves, they decide they're right, and then they get mad about how right they are, and then they get more extreme, then they listen to themselves again. And I think most Americans understand, you know, lowest unemployment rate, I think, in 50 years, dramatic increase in salary for the poorest 10% of Americans, dramatic job creation. You know, if that's what Scarborough thinks is a bad job, I mean... And
rising wages, which they said would never happen. Right. And a trade deficit, yeah, it's high. It's been high for 20 years. Finally, we have someone who's trying to do something about manufacturing and so forth. We've got a strong dollar, which hurts American exports, but our exports are still up. So this idea that you're going to... Now they're worried about the trade deficit. I'm like, Joe, where were you like 10 years ago? All right, another story breaking today. The Hill this afternoon, reporting that HHS is moving up to $385 million from programs to house an overwhelming number of unaccompanied migrant children. That's a lot of money, Newt. $385 million HHS has to take from other programs because of this massive border crush of family units and people who call themselves family units and unaccompanied minors. This just demonstrates in a small way the big cost of illegal immigration.
Well, look, everything we've been told in the last week by Secretary Nielsen and the Department of Homeland Security is that this is a genuine crisis. They fully expect 1 million people to cross the border this year, and that's why they're saying they actually have to have some ability to restrain them and to stop them. And the notion that the Democrats don't think it's a problem to have 1 million people illegally enter the U.S. in 1 year, I think just tells you again how increasingly out of touch with reality the Democratic Party is.
I also want to get your thoughts on the Politico report today that Trump's advisors, it's hard to believe this, are telling him to cut back on rally appearances because, quote, dignified settings like the Oval Office and the Rose Garden will carry more weight with voters than his signature freewheeling arena speeches. If that reporting is true, I find it curious. I mean, I'm for him giving historic speeches in really cool places, and I'm not saying rallies. You can just do rallies because I don't think you can. But that's, you know, he gets energized from the rallies, does he not?
First of all,
that's how he won in 2016.
The rallies are a large part of what make Trump Trump, because he walks in the room, he's surrounded by people who like him. He and they interact together. He gains energy. he tests out a lot of his lines. Now, I will admit, the other day when he tested them out for 2 hours and 18 minutes.
It was a little long.
Well, but I ran into people the next day who were there.
They loved it.
There was like a rock concert.
Yeah.
They were thrilled.
It's like Springsteen. Go for another hour.
I think when there are important moments, the Warsaw speech, the UN speech, the State of the Union, which was an extraordinary speech, yeah, he ought to be very presidential. But what makes Donald Trump unique is he's Donald Trump. And we used to say years ago, let Reagan be Reagan. Well, I'm for letting Trump be Trump.
Mr. Speaker, it's great to have you here from Rome, and it's great to have you on the show. All right, while the border crisis is spiraling out of control, as the Speaker just said, the Democrats are doing everything but trying to find a solution. So today, the House approved sweeping, quote, voting reform measures, election and ethics reform. It all sounds good, right? It's dead on arrival in the Senate, so why'd they do it? It's called H.R. 1. Or For the People Act. I love that. But might it be more accurately called For the Democrats Act? And it includes this gem for immigrants.
And these newcomers make America more American. And we want them, when they come here, to be fully part of our system. And that means not suppressing the vote of our newcomers to America.
All right, joining me now with all the details, Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel. Mike, tell us what is going on here.
Well, Laura, it was a party line vote, 234 to 193, to pass the House at the end of the week. This bill, as you mentioned, has multiple components. For example, on campaign finance, it would create a matching fund system for congressional and presidential candidates, matching small donations with taxpayer dollars. On ethics, it requires that presidents and vice presidents release 10 years of their tax returns and set up an ethics code for the Supreme Court. On voting rights, it allows citizens to register to vote online and would make Election Day a federal holiday. The House Speaker is selling it.
So the Senate, as you receive this bill, you will also be receiving the aspirations, the mobilizations, the persistence, the relentlessness of the American people to have government work for them, for the people.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has blasted it, writing, quote, the whole package seems tailor-made by Washington Democrats to help their D.C. attorneys descend on local communities, exploit confusion, and try to swing elections. McConnell adds they're trying to clothe this power grab with cliches about restoring democracy, but their proposal is simply a naked attempt to change the rules of American politics to benefit one party. It should be called the Democrat Politician Protection Act.
This is a terrible proposal. It will not get any floor time in the Senate. But it is important to understand what they're trying to do here. And I think our colleagues in the House have done a great job in educating the members of the House as to what's involved with it.
McConnell notes it is dead on arrival in the United States Senate. Laura?
Mike, thanks so much for clarifying this for us. And joining me now with reaction, Congressman James Comer and Dr. Dina Grayson, who ran for Congress as a Democrat in 2016. All right, Dina, now explain to me how Democrats, with this legislation that has no chance in hell of passing, they aren't trying to completely alter the American electorate with this bill.
No, what they're trying to do is the most American thing possible, which is empower people to vote. I mean, in order to have a functioning democracy, we need people to go to the ballot box and vote. And so what this is doing is allowing people to register to vote more easily, declaring Election Day a federal holiday, which, by the way, we're one of the only democracies in the entire world that does not have either Election Day on a weekend or have Election Day being a national holiday.
Well, we have Election Day, Dina. We have Election Day that stretches for weeks and sometimes months. How did we possibly survive, Congressman Comer, as a constitutional republic? Mm-hmm. When my mother was a waitress, my dad worked at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft, they somehow managed to get to the polls. It was only one day. Right. And now we need to have at-home registration, use your computer, same-day registration. Right. Now, why is that happening? It sounds like, oh, it's so easy. How did we ever function before? Well, nothing's legitimate until we have instant voter registration.
Absolutely. This is just what McConnell said, the Democrat Political Protection Act. They're trying to build upon what they did in California, all the shenanigans they pulled in California with the ballot harvesting. They're trying to be creative. This is not the answer. People are empowered to vote. it's easy to vote. Same-day voter registration, that's a backdoor attempt by the Democrats to get more people to vote that are not legal citizens. And that's their game plan to try to beat Donald Trump in 2020, and we're not going to let it stand in the House.
Dina, here's another thing that I'm disturbed by as someone who's more of a federalist on these issues, is what's happening with states' rights in all of this. This bill would usurp state authority to set voter ID, also, I believe, on felons, whether felons could vote or not. And that's traditionally been a state prerogative. This is a sweeping usurpation of states' rights, in my view. How do you react to that?
Again, I can't think of anything more American than empowering our citizens to vote.
What if they don't want to vote, Dina? What if they have no desire to vote? In this bill, they require you to be registered. It's your right as an American citizen to be left alone. If you don't want to be registered to vote, why the heck does the government have any right to tell you you have to register to vote? What's the constitutional provision you're relying on?
They're not forcing you to go to the ballot box, Laura. I mean,
they're forcing you to register. What if you don't want to register?
Well,
why is that not pro-choice?
Look, what about the selective service? We force everyone to register for the draft.
That's because of wartime provision. That's because of an emergency wartime provision.
No, that's for everybody right now.
That's
everyone has to register. Every male has to register at 18 for the draft.
That's because in a time of national emergency, we have to be able to mobilize people quickly. This is not mandating that someone, as an individual who does not want to vote, has no desire to vote, should not have to vote or not have to be registered to vote. It's the same stuff they want to do on gun registration, national gun registration.
You're exactly right. Democrats think more government's the answer to everything, and this is another example of more government.
Let's talk about what the Democrats think about 16-year-olds voting. I love this, okay? People think this is like a internet, like total hoax, that this isn't true. But that's right, because Democrats today voted to support the states that want to lower the voting age to 16. Dana?
Well, my understanding is that provision actually did not make it in the final bill. There was an amendment that was proposed to allow 16-year-olds to vote.
A majority of Democrats voted for it.
But it didn't pass. But what it is allowing is for 16-year-olds to basically kind of pre-register to vote. And again, don't we want our youth to get involved and be ready to vote and get excited to vote once they turn 18? And that is part of the bill, and I think that's a great thing for America.
Congressman, are you against the youth voting? Are you and the Republicans must just hate the youth and you don't want them to vote?
We want everyone to vote, but I'm astonished that the Democrats want to raise the age of Americans to be able to own a gun or to be able to purchase tobacco or alcohol, but they want to lower the age for voting. We have nothing that stands in the way of young people voting today. I'm all about more people voting, and I think that we have a great democracy, and the Democrats are continually trying to change that to benefit themselves.
Dina, do you think illegal immigrants should be able to vote in the United States?
Well, they're not allowed to vote. I mean, the reality is...
Do you think my question is, if someone's been here 10 years, they maybe have fraudulent identification, but they are paying taxes out of their salary. Shouldn't they have, and I'm talking as if I were playing a Democrat today, shouldn't they have a right to vote?
I believe in a path to citizenship, and once you have citizenship, I think that all citizens of our country should be able to vote.
You're a raging conservative in the Democrat Party, Dina. That's why we love having you on. All right, thanks to both of you. Next, we expose the hypocrisy of the lamestream media's outrage over Manafort's sentencing. He's been in solitary for like 9 months. Former Whitewater independent counsels Ken Starr and Robert Ray react next. Oh, the lamestream media and their Democrat pals, they're in total meltdown tonight because Judge T.S. Ellis of the District Court, Eastern District of Virginia, did not throw the book at Paul Manafort, put him in jail for, 50 years. He was only sentenced to 47 months in prison. That's 4 years for tax and bank fraud. Instead of the 25 years, of course, that Mueller wanted.
Our legal system in America, it does not operate with equal force for everyone. And Paul Manafort got the special, clubby, Washington elite friendly treatment.
He did not apologize. And yet this judge clearly taking his side.
There are two Americas when it comes to justice. That if you're a wealthy, white-collar criminal, you're treated one way. And if you're not, you're treated another.
Making this about race was utterly disgusting and despicable. And every single one of those people who we just played should know better. And by the way, a lot of the folks that were commenting, we'll play some of these sound bites, they're the same people who are usually railing on against excessively long sentences and are against solitary confinement for even violent criminals. Paul Manafort, by the way, has been in solitary confinement. He has a little slit on the door and a steel place for a thin little mattress, no chair and no desk, I understand, for 9 months. Okay, nonviolent offender. Where are all the civil libertarians? Well, here now, two members of the former Whitewater Independent Counsel's Office, of course, Ken Starr and Robert Ray. I'm so glad to have both of you on tonight. It's my luck. Ken, let's start with you. They are essentially accusing Judge Ellis, who has been on the bench for decades, of being a racist.
Judge Ellis is one of the most respected judges in our system. He's certainly extremely experienced. He obviously had some issues with the prosecution, but it was a righteous prosecution. But then it falls to him as a judge to evaluate everything, the pre-sentencing report and so forth, and then to say, here's what I think is right and just for a 67-year-old person who's in ill health. So I think we do overcriminalize and we do tend to over-sentence. The sentencing guidelines can be very, very harsh. Congress tends to ratchet only up. So I think the judge was doing what he felt was just under all the circumstances. My view is he should be praised and applauded.
And by the way, guys, just so people understand, Robert, I know you know this, but Judge Ellis has been he's been an advocate from the bench against these excessive sentences in many, many cases. Anyone who knows, I think I interviewed with Judge Ellis when I was trying to get a clerkship years ago. But he's like a no-nonsense guy. And so in this big case, this guy Fred Turner, 37 years old, he was convicted on a meth charge. Prosecutors wanted to throw him away, throw away the key, have him in jail for decades. He went on and on about saying, no, that is ridiculous. So he's been an advocate for more lenient sentences in these cases, or more reasonable sentences, I should say, for years. But, Robert, I want you to comment specifically on this race issue, because one of the most prominent commentators from Princeton University, Eddie Glaude Jr., was on the Morning Joe today, I believe, and said this.
Underneath the sentencing gap, just like underneath the empathy gap, underneath the wealth gap, is this value gap. And the value gap, Craig, is the belief that white people matter more than others, particularly white people with money.
White people with money. The man has been in solitary confinement since midpoint last year. Robert.
I went to Princeton. I'm a Princeton graduate. Laura, I don't happen to agree with that characterization. This is all being done for political reasons. By the way, your point that Judge Ellis has a problem with these exceedingly long sentences, particularly when the loss calculation determines what the sentence will be under the guidelines. And I will say, by the way, he's not the only judge that has a problem with those calculations. And that's true with regard to a broad spectrum of the federal judiciary on both the left and the right, based upon appointments made by both Democrat and Republican presidents. Just ask Jed Rakoff in the Southern District of New York, a Clinton appointee, about what his views are with regard to bank fraud sentences, and he will tell you, as many other judges will tell you, look, this thing got ratcheted up as a result of a number of things, Enron, WorldCom, the financial crisis, and so on and so forth, but the sentences have gotten out of control. Now look, it wasn't a problem for the special counsel's office to ask for a sentence within the guidelines, but the point is, this is why prosecutors don't impose sentences. Judges do, and the judges are supposed to be and act independent of a prosecution to determine what is fair. And anybody who thinks, on MSNBC or CNN that they're going to second-guess a judge with 30 years of experience, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, we have so much to get to, and we have so little time. But Ken, this is what drives me crazy. When you go on Twitter and you see like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, all of 28 years old, not a lawyer, didn't sit in the courtroom, wasn't in the jury box, hasn't read the record, doesn't know the guidelines, doesn't know the point about discretion that a judge has, and she immediately blows up the internet with, This just shows you we have two systems of justice, I'm paraphrasing, in the United States of America. Tell me about the corrosive effect, briefly, that has on our faith in the judiciary.
Well, it does. It erodes our faith in the judiciary, and one of the glories of our system is that our judges are independent. They're independent of politics. They are appointed essentially for life. And so here is, as we said earlier, a judge with this rich, vast reservoir of experience, and he had all the facts. So it's really very unfortunate when politicians, especially elected representatives, go sauntering out on the world stage and making what I think are really quite reckless and irresponsible statements, and also condemning our judges. I thought that there was great upset, and I didn't applaud when President Trump condemned judges, right, for taking certain actions, and now here it is exactly the same kind of thing. So I think everybody should just calm down. By the way, if the government feels strongly about this, it can mount an appeal to say this was a downward departure and we don't like this. So there are mechanisms. But here's the point. We have a great and conscientious judge who gave it his best judgment.
Yeah, and he's been sitting there watching this whole thing over the last several months, and he's the best person to sit in judgment of this case. But, gentlemen, I have to get your thoughts on this new Fox report on the House Intel Committee Chair Adam Schiff's staff traveling to New York 4 times to meet with Michael Cohen for more than 10 hours ahead of his hearing on the Hill this week. Ray, let's start with you. Are there legal and possible ethical ramifications at play here, or is this just kind of normal course stuff?
I don't know about legal and ethical ramifications, but it's certainly, I would imagine that the Republicans were not afforded the same opportunity. So it certainly, it would appear to skew the whole process. And, I think a reasonable argument can be made that it also affects the testimony. Again, it leads to the perception in the public domain that this is not a fair process and that it is being done for political purposes, as opposed to what they profess to say, which is that it's just a search for the truth.
Yeah.
And I think that argument is increasingly wearing thin.
Yeah, and Ken, just to close this out, you have Mueller for 2 years. Looks like he's coming up short on what everyone thought, or what liberals thought, that Trump was spooning with Vladimir Putin to get himself elected. He went through all this stuff, and now the Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives, Judiciary Committee, their job is to go through a sitting president's former business dealings? Is that where this is?
No, I'm actually very concerned about that dimension. It's one thing to engage in oversight of the operations of the presidency and of the executive branch, but to go back into business dealings, especially when there's no tether to Russia or Russian alleged influence on the campaign and so forth, I think there's actually a constitutional issue. It's not litigable, so no judge is going to decide this. Yeah. But I think it's a constitutional issue in terms of, is Congress, as the House of Representatives, exceeding its Article I powers to engage in oversight?
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it's not just there, but if people think that the Southern District of New York, for example, is going to be a stalking horse for the continuation of the Mueller investigation by traveling down the road of, endless investigation of the Trump organization, I think that they are dreaming, and I think the Department of Justice at some point in Washington may need to rein that in, because it's not appropriate and it does raise constitutional concerns.
Yeah, we all know Bill Barr. We got to go, guys, but Bill Barr has a lot on his plate. But there's a lot of stuff that has to be addressed sadly from the federal level here, because this has gotten completely out of control. Phenomenal panel. Loved it. Now, coming up, when musical icons fall, is it time to mute their tunes? Just purge them from the public consciousness. We're going to explore the cases of
Chelsea Manning to jail after she refused to testify about WikiLeaks to a grand jury. Manning was behind one of the largest leaks of classified documents in U.S. history. She claims she has already revealed everything she knows and opposes the secrecy of the grand jury process. Manning was serving a 35-year sentence before it was commuted by President Obama. WikiLeaks WikiLeaks is at the center of the Russia investigation. Job numbers for February fell short of expectations. Only 20,000 jobs were added last month, making it the smallest monthly gain in about a year and a half. That's a dip from January, where the number topped 300,000. Despite the slowdown, the unemployment rate fell to 3.8%. I'm Aisha Hannity. Now back to the Ingraham angle.
Huge hit, that HBO documentary, Leaving Neverland. So what's the story
Well,
here?
millions of dollars, Laura, is the story. Sony just paid $250 million to distribute all of Michael Jackson's catalog. There's a popular Vegas Cirque du Soleil show featuring his songs and image. But with the arrival of this documentary, where 2 victims allege horrific sexual abuse at Jackson's hands, all of that is imperiled. Bear in mind, these 2 alleged victims knew Michael Jackson as minors. They sought money from the Jackson estate in 2013, and their claims were thrown out. They also testified on Jackson's behalf when he faced similar allegations in 2005. At that time, they claimed they were never abused. Now, even Corey Feldman, who knew Jackson when he was a boy,
and stood up for him,
right, is backing away from his support for the King of Pop. Watch.
I don't want to be perceived as I'm here to defend Michael, because I can no longer do that. I cannot in good consciousness defend anyone who's being accused of such horrendous crimes.
See, so what's happening now is even the Simpsons producers are pulling back an episode in which Michael Jackson's voice was featured. Now, this is kind of virtue signaling.
Okay, let me just...
the worst sort, Laura.
And Oprah interviewed Jackson.
Right, well,
right?
She interviewed him in 1993, interviewed his family when he died. Now, so they cashed in on him when he was living. Now they're cashing him when he's dead. This is a big problem. The media, Laura, and we'll see this again and again. They are hedonists while these people are being built up. Then they turn into Puritans when they fall. I'd rather we invert the paradigm and police these people while they're big stars. Be a Puritan then. And it ties in nicely with this horrible case of R. Kelly that we're seeing, who also went down in flames over a docuseries at Lifetime. We had the docuseries in January, last month, Surviving R. Kelly. But should we, and this is the question we opened with, should we stop listening to these people?
Well, if this is, okay, I'm not defending anyone. I don't know what happened. I have a problem with relitigating someone's life when they're not there to defend themselves.
Yeah.
I have a problem with that.
And Jackson stood trial for these charges.
I mean, it's not like he didn't, okay, but again, maybe it's because I grew up listening to the Jackson 5 or Thriller, and it's kind of part of my youth and all. But it's part of the youth of the entire country. So now to say the artistic product itself is toxic. Boy, we have a lot of songs and a lot of artists that we better get a big, where's my Sharpie, a big Sharpie pen and go through the entire Sony catalog and all the catalogs.
You got Chris Brown. Okay, beat Rihanna. You've got Jerry Lee Lewis married his 13-year-old cousin.
I'm going to see Jerry Lewis. And
later in the month.
Jerry Lee.
And then Bing Crosby. Remember, Crosby beat the kids with the strap with the metal spikes. I don't think we think of any of that when we hear White Christmas. We just don't.
But I don't know where this ends.
Well,
where does this end? They pull down statues. They're trying to remake history. They don't let people live in the current time and then look at history and individuals with the wisdom that we've gathered. They have to destroy it all.
The music is about us. The music is about our relationship with the time. It's often nostalgic and it captures a time for us. It's not about these people. So when you see R. Kelly, we watched this week, these 2 women who are living with him apparently. They interviewed with Gayle King. Watch this quickly.
How do we say this without being inappropriate? Is this a 3-way relationship, or do you each have a separate relationship with him? How does this work?
Well, both
I'm
of
curious.
those. Yeah, we both have our individual relationships with him, and we all are family all together. We have our moments where we sit and watch movies all together. We go to amusement parks all together.
I'm not talking about, Azrael, going to movies and sitting watching, going to parks. I'm talking about, is it a 3-way sexual relationship?
Sexually? Well, first of all, I'm not here to talk about my personal life, and I would never share with no one what I do in or outside of the bedroom. And as a woman, I'm sure you would not either. There are people all over the world who have multiple girlfriends. It's no different.
It is different. You know what the problem is? The man is a degenerate. R. Kelly's a degenerate. Of course, he's engaged in these horrible things. We should condemn it on the front end and choose your icons wisely, and certainly don't take moral lessons from them. By the way, Laura, I'm at NYU 7:30 Saturday night at my alma mater talking about Will Wilder doing a book signing at 238 Thompson Street, right on Washington
Okay, and you
Square
can
Park.
find out more information on your
my
Facebook
website.
page and on Twitter. So that's great. So
We'll have
that
fun.
could be fun in New York
Well,
with
if
Raymond
I'm protested,
Arroyo.
I'll bring the video.
All right, fantastic. And coming up, the worst media offenders of the week, the Ingraham angle. We have our eyes on you. That's next.
Donald Trump and his policies and his rhetoric are encouraging people, in some cases, forcing people in other cases to cross the border illegally.
It's really, really easy to become numb about media bias these days, especially anti-Trump media bias. So we at the Ingraham Angle think it's our duty to keep track of the worst offenders each week. Joining me now is Jeffrey Lord, former CNN contributor and author of the forthcoming book, Swamp Wars, along with attorney and psychologist Dr. Brian Russell. All right, guys, let's begin with MSNBC anchor Stephanie Ruhle, who, well, thinks Trump has an ulterior motive for running for re-election.
He would run because if he's a private citizen, he'll get indicted.
Yeah.
I'm just going to become president again because I don't want to get indicted. That's twisted, Eddie.
Vladimir Putin has thought the same thing many times.
All right, Jeff. So Trump's not running because he loves the country.
Right.
By the way, this experience has been so much fun for him, I'm sure. I'm sure it wasn't more fun for him in New York when he was like doing Celebrity Apprentice. But it's because he's afraid of being indicted, really.
Well, the thing is, I checked this story out, and Stephanie Ruhle was referencing a New York Times column by Michelle Goldberg.
Oh,
and I've
God.
looked into her, and you got to say, she is a Trump hater. She gets up in the morning hating Trump. She goes to bed at night hating Trump. She talks to people who hate Trump all day long, and then she spews this stuff out as journalism. That's where this comes from, and it's junk, fake news.
Brian, your comment quickly, then we'll move on to the next offender. We have so many offenders, Brian.
Well, everybody around that table shared the presumption that there are indictable offenses, of which I've seen zero evidence involving the president, and I've seen nothing in his words or behavior to suggest to me that he would prefer not to be president or that he's anything other than totally enthusiastic about implementing his agenda another 4 years.
Yeah, all right. Well, sticking with MSNBC, one of its reporters, Jacob Soboroff, you see him trotting around south of the border with the migrants, he figured out exactly why so many illegals are crossing the border.
The reason the numbers are going up are not because of some crazy phenomenon we've never seen before. Donald Trump and his policies and his rhetoric are encouraging people, in some cases, forcing people in other cases to cross the border.
Do psych evals on low-level criminals, and they would say stuff to me like, well, the mall was going to install new cameras and hire more security guards, so I had to shoplift now because I might not be able to later. Nobody causes illegal immigration except illegal immigrants, just like nobody causes shoplifting except shoplifters.
Well, I'd say that the incentive to come into the United States, which is real, is caused, Jeff Lord, by a Congress who refuses to do what needs to be done: seal the border as best you can with technology and a wall, and make sure you stop these this asylum fraud, ongoing fraud, by reforming that system. Those are two simple things that have to be done. Congress is responsible for refusing to do this.
They are, and let it be pointed out that a lot of these people were coming to the borders and streaming across illegally long before Donald Trump ever announced for president. They were doing this in the Obama era. They were doing this in the Bush era. There is absolutely nothing new here. And I might add, if Congress were as serious about protecting the border as they are protecting themselves with all the walls around Congress, we might be in better shape.
All right, now on to a certain CNN host's politicization, and this was startling to me, and I don't get startled very easily anymore, of beloved Jeopardy host Alex Trebek's cancer announcement. Let's watch.
In a time of shallow beliefs and rampant truth abuse in our politics and beyond, every night he makes facts first. We need him now more than ever. So, Mr. Trebek, fight as you have never fought before.
State it in the form of a question, please. All right, Jeffrey, you used to work there at CNN. Is this standard operating procedure to take a serious diagnosis of cancer and turn it into an attack on Trump?
Yeah, it's leftism. And if you remember, Laura, from the 60s, the personal is political. That's what Chris did, in essence, here with Alex Trebek's illness. And it never works out well for the people who do that. And
it's
of course,
embarrassing.
It boomerangs, and it shouldn't have happened.
No, this is just, it's embarrassing. The guy has stage 4 pancreatic cancer, and you use it as an opportunity to hit Trump on Ash Wednesday? Okay.
Wish him well.
Oh, my goodness.
Wish him well and stop
wait,
there.
all right, we got to get to Kirsten Powers. She engaged in whataboutism this week when she defended Congresswoman Ilhan Omar for her anti-Semitic comments. Let's watch.
There has never been a resolution by anybody on the Republican side. So why is this woman being singled out in the way that she's being singled out and having the weight of all of Washington come down on her?
Damsel in distress, Brian.
It's classic deflection. Let's excuse or minimize bad behavior by pointing to other people's bad behavior. It's fallacious. It's annoying. Kids, don't do this. Take personal responsibility for your behavior regardless of what anybody else has done or is doing. Please.
I think sober off and probably so.